好啦，夠鐘啦，咁啊，請問大家聽唔聽到呢？好，咁咧，我哋今日咧就分兩 part。咁咧，我哋15分咧去到35分咧就會講一講 NQ 先啦。咁之後咧，35分後咧，我哋就會講 Rklb 嘅 company background 啦，即係我哋會好簡單咁 cover 下 Rklb 呢間公司係咩公司嚟啊。咁啊，當然咧會睇埋佢張圖啦。咁另外咧就會講佢啱出咗嘅 ER。咁啊，各位好啊，包括 Bilius 啦、Wilkin 啦、Dior 啦、Iman 啦、KL 啦、Alpha， 大家好。咁咧，咁啊，而家我哋講 NQ 先。咁點解會35分先開始講呢個 Rklb 咧？咁咧我都知道頭5分鐘大家係比較忙嘅，所以我都會俾大家時間去做啲 wrap up。因為咧我之後睇 Rklb，今日咧我就應該唔睇個市啦。咁就我會睇翻佢個 presentation 先，因為我係有 invest in 呢隻 stock 嘅，咁就所以佢每一次嘅 ER 咧，我都係好專心咁去睇嗰啲嘢。咁咧NQ 啦，咁啊，琴晚咧我就分咗幾注咧去 put NQ 嘅。咁咧個平均價咧最後就係1214，咁啊去到朝頭早，即係佢收市都係崩翻落去啦。咁咧我就 set 咗個止賺位俾佢啊，咁啊大約喺00左右咁啊食咗佢啦，咁啊賺咗60點啦，今朝早。咁咧之後中間呢啲時間咧就有幾點咁樣去做過出嚟嘅，咁啊最後咧都係等到我哋嘅12136左右咧，我哋先再撥。咁12136呢條線喺邊度嚟㗎？咁樣，咁我哋睇緊日線咧你就明㗎啦。咁啊就係咧我哋121呢條大橫。OK， 咁啊去翻5分鐘圖啦。咁啊總之我都係12136再撥過，咁啊而家就揸住呢一注嘅。咁啊當中咧其中去到82、83左右咧，我又食咗1/3。咁啊，而家剩翻2/3嘅，咁我話又係掛咗個止賺喺度啦。咁我話佢打唔到嘅話，我就會 keep 住佢喺度。咁如果打到嘅話，我會再算。Hello KF。咁啊，仲有少少時間啊，睇一睇埋 YM 啊、ES 啊同 RY。咁咧今日咧，我喺個 group 裏邊咧嘅 topic 啦，即係我哋今日即時討論嘅 topic 咧，就係講其實4大指數裏邊咧 ，YM 咧係最利淡嘅，即係喺4隻之中，如果要跌咧，佢係應該跌得最勁，或者最有空間去跌。咁正常睇圖嘅人都知道究竟我畫幾文定。咁咧總之就係上邊有 range， 下邊有個 range。咁如果佢破咗個 range 咧，向下跌緊落嚟啦。咁咧就而家嘗試緊咧去揾翻呢一條鋼軌啦。佢而家係咁啊，你要睇下佢可以下跌嘅速度有幾快。咁當然啦，近排嘅市咧都係比較平穩嘅，即係冇話好大波幅出現，好少噶。咁啊，佢就算跌都相信佢慢慢跌嘅啫。咁啊 SP500 啦，咁 SP500 咧就沿住呢條上升軌啦，一直都打唔穿啦，連續幾日都。咁今日咧佢暫時就喺呢條上升軌嗰個位嗰度。咁咧我哋紫色呢度咧，其實就係佢成個大嘅壓力位，或者係啲磨位啦。咁我哋會睇住呢個 range 去畫。羅素方面咧，我已經諗唔到新嘅形容詞去形容羅素啦。總之佢就好乖咁喺呢個藍色嘅地方入邊喺度上下磨緊。點解沽 NQ 唔沽 YM？ 之後括弧後邊嗰句咧就係、是、明明你又覺得好似 YM 去大空間跌啲嘅咁樣，咁點解唔沽 YM 咧？咁樣咁因為咧其實我玩 NQ 係玩得熟啲嘅，所以我會揀一個我自己玩得熟啲嘅嘢去。同埋121呢個位實在太過易沽啦，所以機會即係個勝率太高啊，所以我就繼續都係 stick to NQ 去玩。 咁咧 NVDA 咧NVDA 啦，咁啊，琴晚咧就出咗佢會，即係佢入咗紙咧去申請一個配股嘅叫做同意啦，叫做咁咧你見到咧其實佢 P-market 咧基本上就冇喐過啫，即係佢都係行得0.06% 嘅啫，基本上同琴日收市咧係冇變過嘅。咁你就知道咧，其實咧講配股嘅咧應該係講錯咗啦，或者佢增發股票應該係講錯咗。咁咧今日咧我哋喺 group 裏邊咧就 post 咗佢個 news 出嚟。喺 Discord 我哋嘅 Tech 科技同半導體嗰度咧，咁我就 post 咗NVDA 間 news。咦？唔通我冇 post 過你？翻先。哦，唔係呢一單，等下先啊，我 check 得好啲先，我聽埋 NVDA 先。係啦，咁咧呢一單咧，你裏邊咧就睇到咧，究竟佢個所謂嘅集資100億美金咧係咩嚟嘅？咁咧其實如果你 click 入去內文啦，你如果 click 入去內文咧，咁咧其實佢就會解釋俾你聽咩叫呢個儲假發行究竟係咩嚟。咁其實咧佢嘅意思係佢 file 咗之後咧，而 SFC 批准的話咧，佢喺3年內咧可以決定咧佢增發用咩形式去增發啲。其實佢意思係咁樣。咁你話100億美金，其實佢而家市值係幾多咧？咁樣咁我哋而家睇低 NVDA 市值，你就知道佢如果增發100億美金嘅話，會溝淡佢幾多。咁啊 ，suppose 你會即係如果佢咁樣溝淡法，你應該跌8% 啦。咁但係佢而家就同個市就同你講，其實嗰啲講會供股啊，會增發股票啊嘅，暫時都係錯晒。恒指仲有冇得升？我淨係可以答你，因為我自己有轉咗 MBF 去恒指，所以我希望佢升。但係其實你要知道恒指個特性就係咧，佢次都係咁樣啊，即係次都係大單邊，即係我開翻幅圖啦。圖我唔話，咁總之咧，其實你要每次咧都要知道咧，恒指永遠都係咧大單邊、大單邊、大單邊，直到有一日瘋狂收割就會 reverse 得好勁，之後佢會多數係殺到最後追嗰一批人咧一頸血為止咧，佢先會再繼續行翻嗰個方向。所以咧呢個音樂椅咧，你就總之係坐得快就永遠係最着數嘅。恒指永遠都係咁嘅啫。 即係總之大單邊一輪之後，突然間爆另一邊一下，殺晒所有人之後就繼續行。係嘅，你睇翻成交嘅話，今日雖然係大成交啊，但係都唔係話真係好大嗰啲成交啫嘛。即係同埋佢咁嘅成交就已經推咗咁多，你就知道佢根本完全冇對手啦，推出嘅時候。Anyway，所以咧，不論一陣開市如何咧，我哋就今朝嗰度食咗轉啦，而家又食緊呢一轉咧，咁啊加埋都肯定過到110。咁啊上去睇下開市後佢行唔行到落去嘅，即係佢最好嘅 test 翻佢 bottom 啦，即係120。呢排個市都係咁噶啦，總之你係唔知佢上上落落飄到幾時先會爆一邊嘅。咁所以咧，每一日做嘅咧，就係如果你係好友的話咧，就不停咁揾啲低位去 call；你係淡友嘅話，就不停揾啲 reasonable 嘅位去 put 咁樣。咁你係總有位走嘅，只要佢唔好太過離開個日線嗰個 range。咁如果中意炒 range，即係 intraday 嗰啲炒家，其實最中意就係呢啲事添啊。買羅素咪就係咁咯，咪就係喺呢個紫色入邊喺度行下。你唔會揾到方向㗎喺呢位，你話咁大個 support 喺度。咁差唔多開始啦，咁咧就我哋咧就休息5分鐘之後咧，我哋就會開始講 Rklb 噶啦。 其實 Patreon 嗰度就係你幾時 subscribe 嗰個價錢，你就可以一直用到你 unsubscribe。所以就如果你係20蚊嘅，你就會一直。好，咁啊答七啦。咁咧咁啊，終於立志而家就向下跌啦。咁啊，我喺 Patreon 嗰度我都Discord 嗰度講咗一啲我會做嘅 action。Anyway，咁咧就我哋會開始講 Rklb 啦。咁咧 Rklb 呢間公司咧，其實就係一間我睇咗好耐嘅嘢嘅。其實咧，我喺佢未上市之前咧，我已經係睇緊呢間公司啦，因為我自己都幾中意火箭呢樣嘢。你首先咧，我見到有人就係當年我哋 Patreon 仲係5蚊同10蚊嘅時候已經 subscribe， 咁啊非常多謝你長期支持，因為肯定已經係超過1年上嘅 subscriber 嚟嘅。好 ，anyway， 咁咧Rklb 呢間公司咧，其實就我睇咗好耐，因為我自己中意火箭呢樣嘢，咁我睇咗好多呢啲唔同公司嘅發展嘅。咁咧 Rklb 呢隻嘢咧，佢喺大約21年啦嘅2、3月左右咧，就宣布會用 SPAC 嘅方式去上市嘅。咁啊，當時咧我 亦都咧應該係我開 channel 冇耐，咁當時我就強力咁推薦呢隻嘢。咁咧佢啱啱就出咗22年嘅全年嘅 quarter 嘅 financial report 啦。咁所以咧今日我哋係會睇嗰份報告嘅。咁睇之前咧，我好簡單咁介紹一下咧呢間公司先。咁咧喺 Discord 嗰度咧，喺呢個多執 Rklb 下邊啦。咁我寫咗咧成間公司咧有啲咩特別嘅嘢啦。我以前寫過啲關於佢嘅文啦等等。咁好啦，首先咧就最緊要咧，我哋去一去 homepage 嗰度啦。咁啊，圖文並茂啊，因為我呢個係 homepage 啦。咁咧你碌落去咧就會睇到究竟佢總共就發射有幾多次火箭啊，射咗幾多衛星上去啊等等啦。咁啊同嘅 achievement 啦，佢都會寫晒喺度噶。咁咧我哋最緊要咧係睇啲咩咧咁樣。咁咧你碌落去咧，其實咧佢咧發射火箭咧，佢就有兩支大嘢嘅，即係佢有兩支 core 嘅 product 啦。咁第一支咧就叫 electron， 第二支咧就係研發中咧叫做neutron。咁咧首先 electron 啦，就係一支好迷你嘅火箭嚟㗎。咁咧佢嘅負重咧，大約得300 kg 嘅啫。咁咧佢呢支咧而家咧仲搞緊 reuse 嘅。佢之前咧係點樣去搞重用咧？就係佢你見到成支火箭喺度啦。咁咧火箭係有分 first stage 啦、second stage 啦，有啲火箭咧又有 first stage 嘅，即係第一、第二、第三節啦，你當係。第一節咧係我哋成日見到咧喺地面發射嗰個大引擎嚟。咁我一直推上去啦，推到去高空某個位咧，佢呢一節咧就會掉翻落街，成啲跌翻入海啊咁樣嘅，多數係。佢再去分離咗咧，就第二批嘅火箭咧繼續推出大氣層。咁咧呢一節嘅火箭咧，咁佢跌翻落嚟嘅時候咧，佢哋就想去重用呢一節火箭嘅，即係而家係咁滑鼠喺度打圈圈嗰。佢嘅 reusable pan 咧就係佢半空咧攞下直升機咧就咁吊喺佢跌落嚟嘅時候吊翻住佢，之後咧就 carry 翻去。唔好掂到海水，唔好成。可以去睇翻咧究竟可以成 part 重用啊，定係可能因為佢有如果我冇記錯好似8定12個引擎。咁話嗰啲引擎咧其中1、2個可以重用咧，其實對佢嘅 cost 嚟講咧都可以減得好多。咁 second stage 咧就掉咗上大氣層外噶啦，就一定係唔會要噶。first 咁咧佢裏邊咧亦都會 contain 住可能佢要擺上去太空嘅衛星啊等等啦。話呢一節咧就會喺太空嗰度流失咗噶。而家咧佢重用咧永遠都係講緊 first stage 嘅。你會見到咧其實而家 SpaceX 咧就係一個非常成功去重用火箭嘅一個公司啦。其實咧你會見到咧 Twitter 咧有好多火箭嘅公司咧都講自己係可以 reusable 啦，可以重用啦成嘅。但係咧好多都係得個講字嘅啫，暫時咧佢哋係未有成功嘅案例，即係都係講嘅啫，但個理論性就係喺嗰度啦。Rklb 咧呢間公司咧除咗呢個 electron 嘅火箭之外啦，佢咧亦都咧做好多唔同嘅 space system 啦，亦有做佢哋自己衛星嘅。如果你撳去 Space System 呢度啦，你會見到一大紮嘢。呢一紮咧，尤其當中嘅 Solar Solution 啦、Space Software 呢啲咧，係佢合併咗之後咧去收購嘅一啲公司嚟嘅。呢個 Photon 咧就係佢自己嘅研發嘅一個衛星嚟嘅，可以用於呢個收集唔同嘅數據啊等等啦。如果你中意撳落去咧，會見到好多佢唔同嘅設計圖啊，即係亦都會講話佢實際上呢樣嘢有咩用。之後咧有啲例如呢個 Star Tracker 啦同 Reaction Wheel 啦，呢啲係攞嚟做咩嘅咧？Star Tracker 就係呢個啦。Reaction Wheel 咧亦都係咧 Rklb 一個賣得比較好嘅周邊產品嚟嘅。 咁咧 reaction wheel 咧，其實係咧喺太空嗰度咧，你如果要個衛星啦，或者一啲火箭啦，喺一個無重力嘅狀態下轉向咧，你就會用到呢一啲零。咁咧呢啲係一個衛星咧，你抌咗上太空咧，唔可以缺少嘅嘢嚟。好啦，咁咧佢喺上市嘅時候咧，其實就 present 咗咧，佢哋要研發一個叫 Neutron 嘅火箭。咁呢個 Neutron 嘅火箭咧，其實就係去到咧 SpaceX 嘅重量級火箭嗰一種嘅負重嘅。咁而家 SpaceX 而家淨出咗個巨無霸啦，咁而家係砌緊做緊裝準備試射。咁話佢絕對唔係去到個 level，但係佢而家呢個13 kilo to LEO 咧，即係去到呢個太空嗰度啦，呢個叫做嗰個分界線咧，其實就同而家 SpaceX 咧射緊 Starlink 上去太空咧嗰一支嘅負重咧差唔多噶啦。咁呢一支咧仲係喺研發階段嘅。咁呢個係個 model 樣嚟嘅啫。咁而家咧仲係做緊 engine testing 啦，成個外部嘅設計啊，等等等等。咁啊，上年咧其實佢就出咗一個 presentation 咧，就係講呢支火箭咧佢成個嘅設計大綱啦，個設計嘅程度啦，等等。咁咧你有興趣咧，可以喺佢 homepage 睇更加多嘢噶。咁咧如果咧你喺我哋 Discord 嗰度咧，其實我 Discord 咧都相當豐富啊。你中意睇嘅咧，其實應該可以睇到好多嘢。咁咧咁啊，當中嘅重要新聞啦，咁新聞嗰度咧有一啲比較重要嘅新聞咧，我就會 update 喺度啦。咁啊，因為太多周邊嘅新聞，我就唔一定會 update 嘅。咁啊，多數係 contract related 啦，或者係佢研發成果有啲咩突破啦，我先至會 update 喺度。咁同埋佢而家嘅 ER 啦咁樣。咁啊，啱啱咧出咗個 ER 啦。咁咧我亦都咧唔會就咁抌我 news 喺度，我多數咧都會寫埋其實有啲咩比較重要嘅呢單 news。咁我話單 news 其實個 contract 係咩咧？佢個對家點解值得要提一提咧？即係可能佢第一次攞政府部門嘅 contract 啊等等，我呢啲就會特別注明嘅咁樣。咁啊，今次咧啱出咗 ER 啦，咁咧當中咧例如 CNBC 啊、Business Wire 啊嗰啲 news 咧我煲住喺度啦。咁啊 investor.com 咧都有出到關於佢 ER 嘅 news 啊。咁佢哋嘅 title 咧就寫咧係話咧佢就 meet 唔到個 profit 嘅咁樣啦。咁啊，另外咧個 PDF presentation 啦，同埋個 Webcast 咧嘅 link 咧，我都擺咗喺度。咁 PDF presentation 咧同 Webcast 咧，我哋轉頭咧係會一齊 go through 嘅。咁啊，如果左手邊呢度咧，另外再見到咧有一個發射任務列表嘅，咁咧就係每一次佢有啲咩發射啊，或者將會發射，我都會喺度 update。咁咧佢近期咧預計喺呢個下一季啦，應該就有2次發射 pending 緊嘅。咁咧 Rklb 呢間公司咧並唔係淨係做火箭嘅。咁頭先我哋都講過啦，佢有做衛星啦，唔同嘅 space system 啦。佢咧個老闆咧阿 Peter Beck 咧，其實佢咧就好細個咧已經自己係砌好多唔同嘅發明出嚟嘅，即係佢對噴射啊、engine 啊呢啲嘢咧，其實都幾情有獨鍾。佢好細個就已經自己研發呢啲嘢。咁啊，大個就佢自己開咗 Rklb 呢間公司啦。咁佢仲有另外揾到啲天使投資者啊等等，就做咗 Rklb。咁咧，佢除咗火箭啦，咁啊有衛星啊，頭先之後咧，佢合併咗之後咧，就收購啲 Space System Company 啊等等嘅。咁啊，基本嘅火箭資料你會喺度見到啦。咁咧，而家佢間公司咧，其實已經發展到有3個發射台啦。咁有咩特別咧？佢呢間公司，即係佢咁多火箭公司，例如我哋又有SpaceX 啦，至少係咪先？咁我話點解我會買呢間公司嘅股票咧？因為咧，其實咧，你會見到咧，佢有2個 launch complex 咧，係喺 New Zealand 嘅。咁 New Zealand 咧係喺地球嘅南半球嗰度。地球嘅南半球有咩咁特別啊？咁樣其實咧成個南半球咧係得佢2個火箭發射基地嘅啫，即係呢啲係商業用啊，唔係講緊嗰啲軍用嗰啲導彈發射井啊、成咧嗰啲咧。但係其實成個南半球咧係得呢2個發射基地。咁咧有啲咩特別咧？咁樣。咁咧，你呢個咧就同咧發射火箭咧成個物理學咧係好有關係嘅，因為咧你發射一支火箭上太空咧，點解美國又喺 Houston 嗰度去做咧，唔喺其他省份嗰度做？因為 Houston 咧係一個比較近赤道嘅地方嚟，你發射火箭咧永遠咧都係要近赤道啦。之後咧，同埋咧你由東射去西咧係會好啲嘅。 你就唔可以將個方向調翻轉射。咁呢個係同個地球自轉嗰樣嘢有關嘅。咁咧所以咧 Rklb 咧基本上咧，如果得佢一個發射台喺紐西蘭嗰度咧，只要南半球嘅領空咧唔係話有啲咩飛機飛過咧，佢嗰日就可以任佢射啊，基本上。咁啊，紐西蘭政府咧亦都係非常支持呢間企業。咁因為其實紐西蘭咧最近有一個新聞啦，就係琴日嘅。咁咧Australia 嘅政府咧，其實咧就想 triple 佢哋自己嘅 space sector 嘅 funding 嘅。咁其實總之佢都同埋佢係希望喺呢個2030年咧就增加2萬個太空 related 嘅就業職位。咁啊，所以其實佢成個南半球都非常支持呢間公司，因為其實佢private 嘅火箭公司咧，其實全球咧就好少嘅啫。咁佢係一間最成功嘅一間嚟，差唔多。除咗 SpaceX 之外，佢發射嘅次數咧已經係僅次於 SpaceX 啦，同埋佢成功率咧係超級高。因為 presentation 咧，你係會我哋就會再好 deep down 咁樣去高呼呢樣。咁就好啦。咁啊，講完 long complex 啦。咁咧上年嘅年底啦，11、12月嗰時咧，咁佢哋嘅喺美國 Virginia 嘅發射台咧都已經起好啦。咁呢個發射台咧已經用過一次㗎啦。咁喺月底上年底嘅時候咧，佢就喺嗰度咧射咗一支火箭上太空啦。即係話咧，佢而家正式咧可以喺美國嗰度發射啦。佢亦都咧已經攞咗好多唔同美國嘅政府嘅一啲 contract 㗎呢間公司。咁話其實咧佢唔係話你會唔會話佢係一間紐西蘭公司佢就攞唔到美國嘅合約啦？唔會嘅，因為其實咧佢成間公司嘅註冊啦、上市啦等等咧，全部都係用美國去做基準。所以其實你可以話佢係一間美國公司，只不過喺紐西蘭嗰度有佢嘅發射基地喺度。咁佢而家咧，不論喺Virginia 啦，同埋紐西蘭嗰度咧，都有佢哋嘅 office 嘅。咁咧當時咧，頭先講過啦 Rklb 咧有幾個重要嘅收購噶。咁咧21年嘅時候咧，佢自己手上咧就有48 million 美金嘅現金啦，係根據佢嘅財務報表。其實人少咗啊，正常，因為今晚就唔係講個市，就我相信就少啲人會聽。Anyway 咧，好啦，咁咧另外上市咧，佢其實籌集到777 million，咁總共咧就應該係825 million 啦。即係呢個當然唔係實數啦，因為其實都係睇財表再加埋佢上市應得現金咁樣。咁呢係未扣除佢嗰啲上市，仲要俾嗰啲中介費啊、林林審審嗰啲費用啊。咁嗰啲唔知俾咗幾多啦。好啦，咁咧佢上市後啦，有3個重大嘅收購㗎。咁啊，包括咧喺12月13號啦，21年嘅11月啦，同21年10月咧買咗3間公司啦。咁其中一間咧就係一個叫 Daytrading Holding 啦。咁另外一個 Planetary System Corporation 啦。咁咧同埋有一個 Advanced Solution Inc 嘅。咁咧呢3間咧各自咧都係做啲太空 related 嘅。咁啊包括咧做衛星嘅一啲硬件啦。咁啊有一間咧係做太空嘅軟件㗎。咁另外有一間咧就個 Daytrading 咧應該係最好嘅收購嚟。呢間咧就係做啲太空嘅太陽能板啊。佢呢間嘢咧係歷史極度悠久啦，同埋咧其實基本上咧99%嘅即係上太空用嘅嘢尤其係美國政府用啦，美國用嘅要用太陽能板嘅嘢咧，即係太空用嘅太陽能板咧，都係呢間出嘅。咁啊，包括埋最近嗰個有個望遠鏡咧，都係用佢嘅太陽能板啊，即係嗰個可以睇到唔知咩我真係唔記得咗個名。Anyway 唔緊要啦，總之都係啲美國政府最大嘅研究，全部都係用佢嘅太陽能板出。好啦，咁咧佢如果咧呢3個收購加埋咧，其實佢淨係用咗佢21% 上市集得嘅資金嘅啫。咁啊，佢仲有唔少嘅錢嘅。咁佢剩翻咁多錢嚟做咩咧？其實就係研發頭先我哋講嗰支叫做Neutron 嘅火箭，即係嗰啲重量級重用嘅火箭啦。咁嗰啲 Neutron 咧嘅特點咧就係話佢除咗重量級之外咧，其實佢都係可以瘋狂 reuse 嘅。佢咧完全咧係同 SpaceX 嗰支嘢一模一樣咧，係可以出完太空，成支落翻地企喺度，之後可以再射翻上去嘅。 咁之後我哋就好快go through 咧呢一個 presentation 先啦。咁咧呢個就係佢啱琴晚啦收市後咧個 ER 嘅 presentation。咁咧財務報表咧就唔會咁快有嘅，多數咧要過多1-2個月咧先至會有佢個 full 嘅 financial report 嘅。咁所以咧而家呢個只係一個摘要嚟嘅啫。咁啊到時咧出咗 full 嘅 report 咧，如果我見到有啲咩我覺得想講嘅，可能再。咁太空事業爆升係咪至少要10？其實呢個你永遠唔知啊，都係炒風去到邊度就係佢噶啦。好啦，咁咧2022年咧其實係佢極度突破嘅一年啦。咁啊佢射咗42個以上嘅衛星上太空啦。咁啊佢嘅任務成功率係100% 嘅，即係其實佢全部9次嘅 launching 咧全部 success 嘅。咁咧，當中有4張 contract 咧係一啲government 同埋 defense sector 嘅 contract 嚟。咁我話即係佢而家咧，不論商業啦或者咧政府嘅 contract 咧都攞到喺手噶。咁啊之後有啲頁數都係講翻佢而家啲嘢做得幾成功啊等嘅。咁咧當中咧有一樣咧就係話咧，其實佢咧2次最近嘅連續發射其實喺15日內去做到嘅。咁啊平均咧4月去到11月咧。每個月咧都有1次發射啦。之後就介紹佢其他嘅 product 啊。之後咧好啦，你會見到咧有一個詞咧叫做 backlog 嘅。咁 backlog 咧係咩嚟嘅咧？咁就係講緊話究竟佢有幾多訂單喺手。咁咧佢就係話，總之21年 Q4 嘅時候咧就有241 million 美金嘅 backlog 啦。咁去到22年底咧，其實佢哋就有503 million 嘅 backlog 啦。咁話佢呢啲咧 backlog 你係攞嚟 project 咧佢之後咧嘅 turnover 係多。咁但係咧，例如你見到呢個503 million 嘅 backlog，代唔代表下年係503 million 嘅 income 咧？咁樣就唔係嘅，你要睇佢咧個 service 幾時成功咁 provide 咗咧，先至會入帳。咁話先至會見到佢嘅 income 係多嘅。好啦，咁之後咧呢一度咧就係講咧究竟佢點樣去回收支火箭。咁啊其實咧上年咧試過2次咧去用呢個直升機啦喺半空去接住火箭嘅。咁但係咧第一次咧就因為天氣問題啦就要放翻落海。咁第二次咧就係喺佢接支火箭之後咧覺得個直升機個 pilot 啦覺得好似出咗啲問題，所以就放翻啲火箭落海。咁所以2次咧都做唔到話就咁接完之後咧攞翻去基地即刻重用嗰個動作。之後咧，佢呢度就講 Neutron 嗰個 development。咁啊，你有興趣咧，可以睇一睇咧，究竟佢嘅 development 而家係點樣？咁咧，佢總之都係一句，佢就講咧就係 on track 嘅個 development。咁另外呢度開始係講啲 space system 啊等等，佢做咗啲咩啦？咁咧基本上咧就可以 skip 去啲數字嗰度啦。咁好啦，數字 wise 咧，咁咧佢又首先係睇咗 revenue 呢個數先啦。嗱，我哋睇數咧，我自己咧就好少睇 quarter to quarter， 因為其實我中意睇全年做咗啲乜。咁啊，所以我睇 FI2 versus FI21啦。咁紅色咧，你就會見到係 launching 嘅 income 嚟啊。咁啊，launching 嘅 income 咧，其實1倍都冇嘅。因為其實咧發射咧，其實就唔揾錢嘅，永遠都。你冇一間太空公司咧，齋做 launching 可以揾到錢，包括 SpaceX 都唔得。咁啊，Space System 咧。就係講緊嗰啲佢所有 launching 以外嘅生意，即係佢賣嗰啲配件啊、成等等等等。咁你會見到咧，其實呢啲咧先係大茶飯。咁呢個係一個 revenue growth 啦 ，OK， 即係話佢增長嚟嘅。好啦，咁啊，去到呢個係個JAP 嘅 revenue 啊，咁呢啲有興趣你可以睇。咁之後呢度 outlook 咧，其實就係講緊佢預計佢之後下年係點樣。咁咧好啦，咁個 presentation 咧大約就係咁多嘅。咁之後咧我哋就會去睇咧佢個發佈會係點樣。咁我喺入發佈會之前咧，我就會睇下有啲咩問題先。嗱，佢咧你問咧嗰個係咪要成功 provide？ 我以為佢爆咗炸都照收錢。你講呢個係啱嘅嗱。即係呢個 accounting 嗰個問題嚟嘅。嗱，佢收錢咧，其實咧喺你例如多執要射支火箭咁樣啊。咁我同 Rklb 話我要喺25年射支火箭。咁其實咧佢咧應該就每隔幾個月咧都要我俾一批錢佢嘅。 咁咧俾到去發射嗰一日啦，我記得咧佢之前咧個 CFO 咧就講話，其實去到發射嗰一日，基本上佢已經收咗95% 以上嘅錢。咁錢就收咗啦。咁咧去到 provide service 嗰日，即係真正射嗰日咧，你先至可以將呢啲 income 咧 book 落你 account 嗰度。即係佢成唔成功係冇關係嘅，佢都係 book 呢盤帳。但係你要佢真係射嗰一下，佢先至會 book 到數。咁呢個應該就解答到你嘅問題。我見到就應該冇乜其他特別嘅問題啦。咁嘅話，我哋就去段片嗰度。嗱，如果你哋聽聲聽得唔清楚啊，嗰啲咧就講一講。我 skip 晒佢嗰啲廢話先。誒，係咪全部人都聽唔到？嗱，而家我暫停咗嘅，睇下先啊。 嗱，我而家再開始翻，如果再冇聲嘅話，text 多一次出嚟啊，唔該。
That both those numbers have already increased thanks to another successful mission in Q1 23. 2022 was also the year that Electron sent a mission beyond Earth orbit and for the first time successfully deploying the Capstone mission to the moon for NASA. This mission was far from just a standard Electron launch. It was a highly complex mission that showcased our strength as an end-to-end space company, not just a launch provider. In addition to providing the launch for Electron, our team developed and built and operated the Lunar Photon, a highly capable interplanetary spacecraft that set Capstone on a course to the moon. And the team developed a highly efficient lunar trajectory to enable such a small rocket to transport a payload into lunar orbit. Rklb is the only small launch provider to have designed, built, launched, and operated its own satellites in orbit, further expanding our total addressable market. The Capstone mission was the first launch of NASA's Artemis program to return humans to the moon, and we're immensely proud to have enabled this crucial first step. Just 15 days after launching Capstone, our most complex mission to date, the team turned around the next launch, which was a dedicated national security mission for the NRO. This rapid launch turnaround not only set a Rocket Lab record, but is by far the fastest turnaround between successful launches for any other small launch provider. Overall, in 2022, we averaged a launch approximately every 40 days compared with a launch nearly every 60 days in 2021. And from April to November last year, we successfully hit a launch every month. So far, I've touched on some of the key launch achievements for 2022, but it was also a significant year of growth for our space systems arm of the business. More than 200 spacecraft were launched in 2022, featuring Rocket Lab space systems products, including reaction wheels, star trackers, radios, solar power, flight software, separation systems, and more. Rocket Lab technology was featured in one form or another on 30% of globally addressable launches in 2022, demonstrating the success of our strategy to extract value from the full space chain, not just from our own launches. We delivered space systems products to more than 60 customers globally, spanning commercial and government sectors. In 2022, we built a new space system production lines, including one to support high volume reaction wheel production to serve mega constellation customers, and a new satellite manufacturing facility at our Long Beach headquarters. 2022 was the year that really cemented Rocket Lab's position as a leading spacecraft manufacturer. We had more than 25 spacecraft in development for various customers, including NASA, a NASA mission to Mars, a communications constellation for Globalstar, in-space manufacturing satellites, and on-orbit fueling depots. To achieve this, we've scaled our space systems team, expanded our manufacturing and development facilities, and of course, integrated our 4 space system acquisitions into our spacecraft programs. And finally, before we wrap up the full year highlights and dive into the fourth quarter in more detail, in 2022, we saw backlog more than double from 241 million at the end of 21 to more than 500 million at the end of Q4 2022, with growth driven by a healthy mix of launch and space systems bookings. So with that, let's move on to the key accomplishments of 2022's fourth quarter in more detail. The final quarter of 2022 saw us successfully launch 2 Electron missions, delivering satellites to orbit for the Swedish National Space Agency and General Atomics. We were also honoured to be selected by NASA to launch 2 dedicated Electron missions to deliver the Tropics mission to orbit to monitor hurricanes and tropical storms. In Q4, we also received the required licenses and approvals for our first mission from Launch Complex 2 in Virginia. It was a long road to bring LC2 into operation, but with those approvals in place, and at the end of the year, we're able to launch the first Electron mission from US soil early 23. To top that off, we also introduced Rocket Lab National Security, a new subsidiary to deliver reliable launch services and space systems capabilities to US government and its allies. We signed our largest order of satellite separation systems in the company's history, totaling $14 million in hardware to serve the Space Development Agency's Tranche 1 transport layer. It was also the quarter that Capstone reached lunar orbit, signaling final mission success for the NASA mission more than 5 months after the successful launch on Electron. We also got testing underway at the NASA Stennis Space Center for Archimedes engine hardware, and completed construction of the new satellite production line and clean room at our Long Beach headquarters. Okay, let's start off with the key achievements in Q4 for Electron. We rounded out 2022 with 2 successful Electron launches in Q4. Both missions were from Launch Complex 1 and saw our total launch tally for the year reach 9 successful missions. As mentioned, this is a significant increase in launch cadence from 6 missions in 21. And we look forward to continuing to increase that cadence in 23. Electron is already a trusted launch provider to NASA, having successfully delivered missions to low Earth orbit and to the moon for the agency previously. So once again, we're honored when NASA entrusted Electron to deploy the remaining spacecraft in the Tropics constellation across 2 dedicated missions. This is a constellation close to our hearts because it aims to enable scientists to study hurricanes, tropical storms, and ultimately leading to improved modeling and prediction to help save lives and livelihoods in the path of storms. These missions are scheduled to launch no earlier than May this year, and we look forward to sharing more about them in the lead up to launch. In November, during our final mission for 2022, we conducted another successful splashdown and ocean recovery of Electron's first stage as part of our rocket reusability program. We had initially planned to attempt a helicopter catch for this mission, but not all the requirements were met to ensure a successful capture due to a brief telemetry loss with Electron's first stage during atmospheric re-entry. This turned out to be quite a happy turn of events, as it gave us another chance to bring back a stage that had been for a swim. Never one to waste an opportunity. Our team put the return stage and components through analysis and testing, and we started to see a bit of a pattern here that we hadn't initially expected. Electron survives an ocean recovery in remarkably good condition, and in a lot of cases, its components actually pass requalification for flight. In one of our up-and-coming flights, we're going to attempt another ocean recovery, this time with a few additional waterproofing modifications to the stage to protect some of the key areas and the bits we want to keep dry. Pending this outcome of testing and analysis of the stage, the mission may move us towards sticking with marine recovery altogether and introduce significant savings to the whole operation. In 2022, we proved that it was possible to rendezvous with a returning stage mid-air and get it on the helicopter hook, but if we can save ourselves the extra step by just plucking out of the water, we will. Without the helicopter, if we're able to determine that ocean recovery is the most viable and effective path for recovery, this opens up even more flexibility with our launch windows and takes us from around 50% of Electron missions being suitable for recovery to anywhere between 60 and 70. We look forward to sharing the developments of this following our next recovery mission in the coming months. Moving on to Neutron achievements for the fourth quarter of 2022. In Q4, we officially opened the Archimedes Test Complex at NASA Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. The site will be home to engine testing for Neutron's Archimedes engine, and the team made fire at the site for the first time before the end of the year with the commencement of a pre-drone igniter testing. Q4 saw some major movements at NASA Wallops Flight Facility for Neutron, including the completion of our first Neutron development building, which will be home to some stage assembly and integration activity. The team also started moving dirt at the site of Neutron's launch pad, with construction moving into full swing now that we're in the new year. We also started to see some really exciting hardware developments in Q4 with carbon composite structures for Neutron's first stage and second stages in production. As you can see here, we're working on a much bigger scale than Electron, but we've been able to take that deep composites experience we've developed with Electron and use that knowledge to rapidly streamline Neutron's development. We're designing Neutron to be the world's first carbon composite large launch vehicle with the lightest and highest performance upper stage in history. And when I say light, I mean really light. The vehicle's full tank combined that you see in the image, 2 of those halves together weighs about the same as a Harley-Davidson motorbike, some 380 kgs, so incredibly high performance. Moving on to from launch to into space systems. In the final quarter of 2022, we hit some great milestones for space systems, including having Rocket Lab hardware on 30% of all globally addressable launches. In the quarter alone, more than 90 spacecraft launched to orbit featuring Rocket Lab's space systems technology. One of the most exciting of those was the Artemis 1 launch of NASA's SLS rocket in November. That mission featured Rocket Lab solar arrays, satellite dispensers, and software, helping support NASA's goal of returning humans to the moon, to the surface of the moon. In Q4, we were selected to develop the Satellite Operations Control Center, or SOC, for Globalstar's growing low Earth orbit constellation. The SOC contract builds on the existing relationship between NVDA, Rocket Lab, and Globalstar, established in February 2022, when Rocket Lab was awarded a $143 million contract to design and manufacture 17 spacecraft buses for Globalstar's new constellation of satellites. These new satellites and SOC will augment Globalstar's existing constellation, delivering reliable mobile satellite voice and data services from space. The SOC will provide 24/7 monitoring and management of Globalstar's constellation, including continuous satellite control and monitoring using Rocket Lab's MAX ground data system, satellite orbit determination, maneuver planning, collision avoidance, orbit maintenance, and propellant management. By designing and manufacturing Globalstar's spacecraft buses, delivering the flight and ground software solution, and developing and supporting the Spacecraft Operations Center, we're once again executing on our strategy of going beyond launch to deliver complete space mission solutions. And finally, in Q4, our solar team in Albuquerque, New Mexico, delivered the final solar panels for the NASA Gateway Power and Propulsion Element. These solar panels will enable NASA's Gateway Lunar Space Station to be the most powerful electric propulsion spacecraft ever flown, and they're a critical part of returning humanity to the moon. That wraps up Q4 2022, but we've been busy since then, so let's take a quick look at some of the company's key accomplishments so far in Q1 23. Electron took to the Virginia skies for the very first time in January 23, marking the beginning of Rocket Lab launches from the US. It was a successful mission that delivered 3 satellites for commercial constellation operator Hawkeye 360. This was a significant moment for us and for the small satellite industry, as the new US launch pad represents even more flexibility and responsive launch capability for small satellite operators. All 3 Rocket Lab launch pads across 2 hemispheres are now operational, and we look forward to many launches from them all. With that, first LC2 mission successfully launched, we're on to the next. In fact, right now there are rockets at both Launch Complex 1 and Launch Complex 2 preparing for a launch within a mere few days of each other. From Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand, we're preparing to launch 2 satellites for Black Sky Global in what will be our 6th mission for the Constellation Company. Meanwhile, at Launch Complex 2 in Virginia, the team is preparing to launch a mission for Capella Space, a SAR constellation operator that we previously launched in 2020. Both missions are currently scheduled to launch in March, with launch windows to be finalized in the coming days based on final customer requirements and range status. And while we have 1 rocket in the pad for Capella Space, we've just signed a multi-launch contract with them to launch another 4 dedicated Electron missions through 2023. These missions are on the top of our 2nd launch for them coming up in March, so 5 launches to look forward to this year altogether. We're honoured that they've entrusted us with 5 missions in 2023 to help build their growing SAR constellation. The latest multi-launch deal with Capella Space further cements our leadership position as the trusted small launch provider of choice for constellation operators. We've now launched and signed deals with some of the most prominent constellations and operators globally, demonstrating the value of that Electron provides to these customers by offering reliable and flexible launch to tailored orbits. Onto our space systems, and we've started the quarter strong by releasing 2 new space systems products, a new satellite radio and reaction wheel specifically designed for constellation-class spacecraft. These products bolster our existing heritage in space system components and provide an entry point to new programs and mission profiles. This quarter, we also formally established a new subsidiary, Rocket Lab Australia, to explore opportunities to support the expansion of Australia's national space capabilities. The Australian government has set a goal to triple the size of the Australian space sector from an estimated $4 billion Australian in 2016 to $12 billion by 2030. To help facilitate this growth, the Australian government has committed more than $2 billion to the civil space sector since 2018 for programs spanning Earth observation, satellite infrastructure, high-tech manufacturing, and support of NASA's Artemis program. The Australian government has also committed $17 billion above and beyond the civil space investment for the development of defence space capabilities. Rocket Lab has already played a key role in supporting Australia's rapid growth in space through supplying launch and space system products to Australian organisations. By building on our deep expertise and proven heritage in the space sector, we're well positioned to advance Australia's capabilities in space. We have people on the ground already, and we look forward to exploring opportunities where they make strategic sense for us as a business and where we can truly strengthen Australia's position as a global space sector. On the Neutron front this quarter, we've made investments and progress into establishing manufacturing infrastructure that will support scale production of Neutron. This includes composite tank molds for stage 1 and 2, as well as the installation of large 3D printers and milling machines to enable rapid production of the Archimedes engine. Q1 2023 brought welcome news in the form of a new acquisition strategy for the National Space Security Launch. This is the Space Force's program to launch the nation's most critical and valuable government assets. Under NSSL Phase 3 RFP, which was released earlier this month, new entrant launch vehicles qualify to bid for launches. Neutron was designed with NSSL launches in mind, and we look forward to making Neutron available to meet the national security needs. You know, this wasn't a chance of good luck for us. We actively engaged NSSL on this to introduce this change on the back of our strong relationship with them. The first vote of confidence in Neutron came back in September 2021 when we won a $24 million contract for the development contract for Neutron's upper stage through the Space Force's Systems Command of Launch Enterprise, which falls under the NSSL program. The contract recognized Neutron's design to maximize mass-to-orbit capability, orbital insertion accuracy, and responsive dedicated launch for the US government, all key requirements for the highest priority missions awarded through the NSSL. And I'm pleased to see this further strengthening of our relationship with this new path opened up. And finally, before I hand over to Adam for the financial highlights, I'd like to share that David Cohen is wrapping up his time on Rocket Lab's board of directors. David is a partner at Bessemer Venture Partners, one of our earliest investors, and he joined Rocket Lab's board in 2014. Since then, we've been grateful for his leadership and guidance as we grew Rocket Lab from a small startup to a publicly listed company, the world's leading small launch provider and now global space systems firm. I'd like to personally thank David for his support and efforts at Rocket Lab over the past 9 years and wish him the very best for his continued work in deep tech. And with that, I'll hand over to Adam to discuss the financial highlights.
Great, thanks Pete. I will first review our fourth quarter 2022 results and then discuss our outlook for the first quarter of 2023. Fourth quarter 2022 revenue was $51.8 million, which was within our initial guidance range of $51 to $54 million and well above our revised guidance range of $46 million to $47 million provided in December. Fourth quarter 2022 revenue reflects growth of 88% over the year-ago fourth quarter of 2021, and the result of 2 successful launches and continued strong contribution from our space systems business. The overage to our revised guidance range was a result of higher than anticipated revenue recognition from a SolAero contract to a major prime contractor program. This closes out a very successful year with full year 2022 revenue of $211 million, up 239% from 2021, with launch and space systems finishing the year with revenue growth of 56% and 546% respectively. Now turning to gross margin. GAAP gross margin for the fourth quarter was 3.5%, below the low end of our original guidance range of 5 to 7%. Non-GAAP gross margin for the fourth quarter was 15%, which was also below our original guidance range of 16 to 18%. GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins results relative to both our revised guidance and to our Q3 2022 results reflects a combination of reduced launch cadence and a related lack of fixed cost absorption, below average revenue contribution from the Catch Me If You Can R&D recovery mission, and an unfavorable mix within our space systems components revenue. More specifically, launch cadence was impacted by the push out of the Hawkeye 360 launch from the December quarter due to weather and other factors. The below average revenue contribution from the successful Q4 2022 Catch Me If You Can recovery mission was a conscious decision to trade off acceleration of the Electron recovery margin improvement initiatives versus maximizing revenue from additional
喺呢度咧會見到咧佢講緊咧有一個叫 GAAP 嘅 gross margin， 咁有一個叫 non-GAAP 嘅 gross margin。咁其實 GAAP 係咩嚟嘅？其實就係一個 General Accepted Accounting Principle， 即係中文咧就係一個全球通用性嘅會計準則。咁 non-GAAP 咧咁就係用翻佢，應該就係講緊佢用緊美國嗰種計數嘅方式，就係 non-GAAP。好，咁而家繼續。
Payloads that would have taken longer to secure and integrate. Our current launch manifest and proven execution capabilities gives us confidence that we'll see a return to growth and gross margin expansion in the launch segment of our business as we progress through 2023. Lastly, the unfavorable mix within Space Systems was a result of the timing of revenue recognition under a legacy low-margin pre-acquisition SolAero contract with a major prime contractor. We anticipate significant top-line growth to resume for our Space Systems segment in the second half of the year as we forecast to begin benefiting from more meaningful revenue contribution under the MDA Globalstar contract, which brings with it gross margin uplift, in addition to forecasting a beneficial mix and change in our Space Systems component revenues as our higher margin component solutions contribute at a greater rate versus the lower margin component solutions. We ended Q4 with 818 production-related headcount, up 21 from the prior quarter, which positions us well to not only scale production, but also the resources to exploit margin-expanding production efficiencies. Turning to operating expenses. GAAP operating expenses for the fourth quarter were $39.1 million, at the low end of our guidance range of $39 to $41 million. Non-GAAP operating expenses for the fourth quarter were $27.3 million, which was below our guidance range of $28 to $30 million. The decline in both GAAP and non-GAAP total operating expenses versus the third quarter was primarily driven by an R&D grant benefit and lower stock-based compensation, partially offset by increases in headcount and prototyping expenses supporting Neutron and Space Systems. In R&D specifically, GAAP expenses decreased by $2.5 million or 14% in the fourth quarter, driven by, again, R&D grant benefits and lower stock-based compensation. Non-GAAP R&D expenses were down $1.6 million or 13% quarter on quarter. We anticipate a return to sequential growth in R&D as we ramp investment in our Neutron launch vehicle. Quarter-ending R&D headcount was 348, representing an increase of 18 heads from September 30th, 2022. In SG&A, GAAP expenses increased $1.1 million quarter on quarter, or 5%, driven primarily by outside services, primarily owing to the first-year SOX compliance-related expenses. Non-GAAP SG&A expenses increased by $1.6 million, or 10% quarter on quarter, mostly driven by outside services as previously mentioned. Quarter-ending SG&A headcount was 197, representing an increase of 1 head from September 30th, 2022. On a year-on-year basis, GAAP operating expenses for the fourth quarter of $39.1 million were up $8 million, or 26% year-on-year, while non-GAAP operating expenses of $27.4 million were up $7 million, or 34% year-on-year. The growth in both GAAP and non-GAAP operating expenses were primarily driven by the acquisitions of ASI, PSC, and SolAero, which occurred in Q4 2021 and Q1 of 2022, as well as increases in staffing costs related to Neutron vehicle development, the Electron booster recovery initiatives, and Photon development projects. In R&D specifically, GAAP expenses decreased by $3.1 million, or 25% in the fourth quarter, while non-GAAP expenses were up $2.6 million, or 33% year-on-year. In SG&A, GAAP expenses increased $5 million, or 26% year-on-year. Cash consumed from operations was $19 million in the fourth quarter compared to $23 million in the third quarter. The sequential improvement of $4 million was driven primarily by improved cash collections during Q4. Purchases of property, equipment, and capitalized software licenses increased from $8 million in Q3 to $15 million in Q4. These investments are primarily aimed at new equipment facilities underpinning our Neutron development initiative and expansion of our Photon production capabilities. Overall, non-GAAP free cash flow consumption in the fourth quarter was $33.9 million compared to $31.3 million in the third quarter. The ending balance of cash equivalents, restricted cash, and marketable securities was $484.33 million at the end of the fourth quarter. With that, let's turn to our guidance for the first quarter of 2023. We expect revenue in the first quarter to range between $51 and $54 million, which reflects $32 to $35 million of contribution from Space Systems and $19 million of contribution from Launch Services, which assumes 3 launches or 2 remaining launches in the quarter. One of the 3 launches forecasted in Q1 was the successful January Hawkeye 360 mission out of LC2 in Virginia, which was a partially filled rideshare mission where, similar to an R&D mission, we made a conscious choice to focus on expediting our first ever LC2 launch versus maximizing revenue by filling the rest of the mass capacity on the launch vehicle. Based on our manifested launch backlog, we expect our average selling price to increase back to our standard pricing as we progress through the remainder of 2023. We expect first quarter GAAP gross margins to range between a -5% and -3%, and non-GAAP gross margins to range between +7% and 9%. These forecasted GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins reflect greater contribution from our Launch Services segment, as well as lower margin product mix within our Space Systems segment. We expect first quarter GAAP operating expenses to range between $44 million and $46 million, and non-GAAP operating expenses to range between $33 million and $35 million. This quarter-on-quarter increase is driven primarily by increased R&D staff costs and prototype expenses related to accelerated investments in the Neutron launch vehicle development and scaling of our Photon product family. We expect first quarter GAAP and non-GAAP net interest expense to be $1 million. We expect first quarter adjusted EBITDA loss to range between $28 million and $30 million, and basic shares outstanding to be approximately 476 million shares. And with that, I'll turn it back to the operator for questions.
Certainly. If you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by 1 on your telephone keypad. If for any reason you would like to remove that question, please press star followed by 2. Again, to ask a question, please press star 1. As a reminder, if you are using a speakerphone, please remember to pick up your handset before asking your question.
好啦，之後咧，其實就係最重要嗰個環。咁咧 Q&A 咧，往往先係呢一啲 presentation 嘅精華嚟嘅。
Also, on behalf of the management team, we would certainly, if you would like to ask a question, please press star followed by 1 on your telephone keypad. If for any question comes from the line of Christy Luong of Morgan Stanley, please proceed.
First question for me on Global Star. We've seen their difficulty in raising financing. It's great to see that they finally have a resolution with Apple now prepaying to help fund the satellite build. So in this environment where capital is more expensive, how prevalent are financing challenges amongst your commercial customers? Is this a one-time thing, or are you seeing this continue into the supply chain?
Yeah, I can take a pass at that, and Pete, you can also provide your thoughts, Christine. So, I would say that certainly with the capital markets conditions the way they are, it's difficult for a lot of people to continue to finance their businesses. We've been relatively immune from that, largely given the mix that we have of either direct government contracts or also with customers who have deep ties and rely on a great amount of their revenue to come from government programs. So, I think we've probably been impacted a lot less than maybe some other folks you come across. But we're not completely immune to it. We've certainly seen some of our smaller customers struggle from time to time and have required a little bit longer to pay, or in some cases having to take relatively small amounts of bad debt reserves for amounts owed us. But for the most part, it really hasn't been a tremendous factor on us to date. Hopefully, it continues to be that way. But there's hard to determine how this is going to roll out going forward, given the environment that we're in. Pete, I don't know if you have any different thoughts on that.
嗱咁咧，頭先JP 人定 Morgan Stanley 嗰個人咧，就問佢其實而家就好多細嘅家人咧，其實佢哋好似啲資金鏈都有咁，佢話其實對你 Rklb 間公司有冇咩影響咧？咁咧頭先嗰個 CFO 就答翻佢咧，其實咧佢哋咧最細嘅家人咧，的確係有影響嘅。 即係佢咁，但係咧，因為其實佢大部分嘅 contract 都係一啲佢哋如果佢哋合作好耐嘅客人嚟㗎啦，或者咧係一啲加分 contract，所以其實喺對佢哋咧收錢嗰方面咧，其實就唔太大影響。
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right.
Very healthy balance sheet. And we're also, really particular about who we take on as customers. So when we look into our backlog, we don't see a lot of kind of financing risk in there, again, because of the mix of customers that we have. And again, I think that we've been able to be a little bit more creative and flexible in some cases in working with customers to kind of help support their business and also kind of make sure that, we're in a good position from, maintaining and growing market share in many cases.
Thanks for the addition, Adam. And so maybe, Peter, as a follow-up on government contracts, you touched on the Space Force RFP for the National Security Space Launch Phase 3. And, right, it looks like Lane 1 is geared more towards medium-sized launch vehicles where Neutron would play in. So can you talk about the timing, milestones to watch, and size of opportunity for Neutron?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a milestone perspective, for our program, the things to kind of watch are, tanks rolling out, obviously engine testing and integration. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background with it's less obvious. We talked about moving dirt on a launch pad. Well, actually, to get to the point of moving dirt on a launch pad, there's a tremendous amount of kind of work that needs to be done to get to that point. So those are the things I'd be watching out for. We obviously we have a great relationship with the whole program and NSSL program, and we're encouraging them to certainly think about how can the US maximize its capabilities across a wide range of launch vehicles and opportunities to leverage that. So. We were very, very happy to see, the second lane come in and that aligned exactly with what we had been promoting.
Great, thanks, guys.
Thank you. The next question comes from Eric Rasmussen of Stifel. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you for taking the questions. So first, maybe just on launch, you slotted for 3 in Q1, 2 additional coming up. It looks like you're timing sometime in March. But Adam, you'd previously talked about maybe 14 for the year. We had one slip from Q3 to Q4, so I'm assuming maybe that makes the number 15. Is that still a good number for us to be modeling and thinking about as we look at launch?
Yeah, no, Eric, I think so. I mean, we typically have seen. I mean, it's a relatively young business, so we don't have a great amount of track record as far as seasonality is concerned. But it does seem like Q1 gets off to a slower start, probably a function of a little bit of a hangover from the vacations, launch ranges, kind of being kind of closed at the end of the year. So it takes a while for programs to get respun up. But with a targeted 3 launches in the first quarter, I think we're in great shape to get to that 15 number of launches of the year. And demand actually is higher than we did get a higher number of launches than 15 this year. But we've also learned through the School of Hard Knocks that we can get burned when we rely really upon what just our customers are telling us what their demands are, because customer spacecraft oftentimes seem to slip and push out to the right at the last moment just because of the nature of how these programs develop and when things come through their final qualification and testing. So we think that we've got we've kind of risk adjusted the number, so we think 15 is the right number for the year given where we're at and given the likelihood that some programs could push to the right. But time will tell. But right now it feels like the right number.
Okay, maybe just adding to that, you mentioned we've seen it with the Q1 outlook for launch at 19 million for 3 launches, but you mentioned that you probably would get back to more of a normalized ASP, throughout the year. Is that's fair to say, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Again, we made a conscious choice to get that launch off earlier in the year versus kind of take more time to backfill all the volume capacity on the vehicle. So and given right now, I mean, we have very, very strong visibility and conviction in where the manifest is, and we know what the launch prices are for those. So yeah, we're confident where the ASP is migrating back to where it has been and more towards our kind of advertised kind of sticker price.
Okay, and maybe just my follow-up, on the NVDA contract, any milestones that maybe you can call out, where are you in terms of building out the manufacturing line and sort of what sort of volumes can you achieve? And then maybe just on the opportunity for launch, any updates there? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let Pete. You want to take a first pass at that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, Eric, things are looking good. So, come and visit us. You can see a fully stacked integration facility. So at headquarters. So that was completed last year, and that facility is more than capable of processing the 17 that are on contract, and any further that may be options. So no, I think we're in good shape there, and we continue discussions for the launch of those particular spacecraft.
And Eric, I think I'll just add on a little bit there. We continue to kind of knock down the gates towards these milestones on the program. So we've cleared quite a few of the scheduled milestones. We're on schedule. Everything looks to be in good shape. So we won't go into all the details of all the kind of milestones and sub-milestones, but we've so far we've been very fortunate to be hitting all of our milestone dates, getting through successful reviews. So yeah, all that looks very, very good. So far, we've also been pretty fortunate that we haven't been burned by any supply chain issues at this point. So the program is still relatively early, but given everything that we're seeing right now, everything looks to be on track, and so far we've got happy customers.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from Scott Deuschel.
咁啱個問題咧，其實佢就問究竟而家嗰啲 supply chain 有影響啦，咁其實對你公司有啲咩影響？咁總之其實佢就係話，其實基本上咧對佢公司咧係冇乜影響嘅，咁啊佢哋嘅客人咧係 very happy with 佢哋嘅進度啦。
Of Credit Suisse, please proceed.
Hey, good afternoon. Adam, it looks like the Q1 EBITDA loss you're guiding to is about double the loss in Q4 and pretty close to what the street was expecting for the full year in 23. So just given the market's focus on profitability, I was wondering if you could give some further context on what's driving that increase and then how we should think about the trend from Q1.
Sure. Yeah, I think that I don't think there's been a tremendous amount of resolution in some of the models that are out there. I think that when, we've communicated to investors kind of the level of investment required for the Neutron program. When we came out, we said it was going to be roughly a $250 million program to get the first Neutron to the pad at the end of 2024, and we believe we're still on schedule with that. So if you kind of just look at kind of what that, and again, we provided a breakdown of how much of that was going to be, in CapEx versus, prototyping, and then, OpEx through headcount and so forth. I think the ability there is to model out what that should be, especially given where we are now as we are in Q1 of 2023 and then anticipated launch date in Q4 of next year. So, I guess it shouldn't be too much of a surprise kind of where we are kind of on that adjusted EBITDA basis. And I think that, at least for internal purposes, it feels like it's pretty consistent with where we thought we'd be given where we are in the life cycle of the program. From a modeling and trending going forward, we're going to see continued uptick in spending related to Neutron. I think we've crossed the hump or gotten over the hump for a lot of our Photon space systems or related pure R&D work. There's still more to come, but a lot of it's kind of behind us. But I think that, we'll crest the Neutron spending hump probably is sometime in the middle of next year, again, as we get closer and closer to the launch date in Q4. So again, I think the uptick in spending, the current or the forecasted Q1 adjusted EBITDA, while we don't give guidance beyond kind of the next quarter, I think that's a number that's going to be, I don't think we're looking at the low water mark as far as adjusted EBITDA loss in a quarter, because again, spending is continuing to ramp up. But I also don't think that we're looking at that it's going to get dramatically higher than where it is. But we feel like we're kind of in a new range of kind of spending on the program. But we also see revenue increasing over the same time period. So, hopefully a lot of that is because I'll say, so yes, spending will increase fairly significantly, but we believe that revenue is going to be helpful in growing along with that growth in R&D spend so that we don't kind of balloon that adjusted EBITDA loss on any quarterly basis.
Okay. So, if Q1 is not the low water mark, could full year EBITDA losses be 120 million or more? Like, I'm just trying to put some sort of finer point on it because, to your point, there's not a lot of resolution in street models.
嗱，而家咧嗰個投行嗰人咧就問佢話咧，其實你預計咧，你 Q1 嗰條數咧，其實已經係跌多過你上 啱 Q4 1倍噶啦喎。咁我話其實你之後係點睇嘅咧？同埋你 develop Neutron 嗰個係要用嗰個金，咁我話你嗰個點樣解？咁咧頭先嗰個 CFO 咧就答佢，咁其實咧佢哋而家嘅 business 係 ongoing 咧，其實係順利嘅。咁咧。佢哋咧亦都係有收緊錢咧，即係除咗佢哋自有資金之外啦，亦都咧係有收緊咧客人咧去 support 呢個 Neutron，所以咧其實佢哋覺得係 OK 嘅。咁咧再啱咧，佢嗰個投行嗰人咧就補充咗個問題，就話：好啦，你而家條數其實係咁，我話其實你預計你 今年啊 Q2、Q3、Q4 啦，即係佢 Q1 出咗 projection， 咁 Q2、Q3、Q4 會唔會係繼續係 low water 嘅咧？佢同個趨勢，即係會唔會係繼續再差落去啦？定係佢哋會點睇咧？咁而家我哋睇下 CFO。
Yeah, again, a lot of it depends on, a lot of things are still in flux as far as, the major prototyping items, when we're going to get invoiced for those types of things. So it's really hard to predict right now, like exactly what the curve is going to look like, or the slope of the line on R&D spending increase related to Neutron. We also have some pretty significant revenue growth coming in the second half of the year related to some of our space systems programs, again, which depending on how hard they hit up and the related margins that accompany those, hopefully moderates quite a bit of that spending increase. So yeah, at this point, I'm not able or kind of willing to go really beyond what the next quarter looks like. But as we spend more time together and we get a little more color and visibility, we'll certainly share that with you and others.
嗱，咁咧佢點樣答佢咧？佢就話其實咧去 Q2、Q3、Q4 啦，其實佢哋就而家係睇唔到咁遠嘅佢直。咁咧佢哋都係話咧，總之 Neutron 嘅 development 咧，佢哋就嘅 cash flow 咧，佢哋係有咁話，但係咧就都唔好 certain 咁答翻我投行嗰個人嘅，其實佢答。咁之後咧係啦，就係咁啦。咁總之2、3、4佢亦都唔會 Q2、3、4佢亦都唔會咁快就有啲任何嘅 prediction 可以講出嚟。咁話其實正常嘅 CFO 都會咁答，因為其實佢份 presentation 出咗 Q1 嗰個 projection 噶嘛。咁而家你問佢叫佢攞埋2、3、4嗰個 projection， 佢就算有咧，佢都唔會攞出嚟，因為佢咁樣喺呢個 presentation 嘅 conference call 嗰度講咗咧，就會俾人攞去登報，所以佢其實就算有，佢都唔可以講。
Okay, I mean that's super helpful. And then just as a follow-up, does the $143 million contract with the NVDA, does that include any inflation protection mechanisms on it? Just given that it's kind of a multi-year contract and you're in an inflationary environment, just curious on inflation.
好啦，咁而家投行個人再追問佢，咁咧佢近期咧簽咗一啲合約啦，咁啊呢啲合約係幾年？咁而家咧喺一個 inflation 嘅情況之下咧，到底你同啲客人簽嘅合約咧有冇加啲 inflation
protection on that contract specifically? Thank you.
Yes, no, that's a good question. No, that's a firm fixed price contract. So we were able to secure some incremental scope under that agreement with the SOC to operate the satellites on orbit for the customer. So we got some uplift to total revenue from that. We didn't disclose the exact amount, but I think we feel pretty good because when we were modeling out the BOM and other factors building the satellites, we took into consideration a certain amount of inflation. Now, is inflation running hotter than we thought it was going to be, a year and a half ago when we were doing that modeling? Certainly, but we also put in some cushioning factors to make sure that we come out on the right side of that. So we feel very good, and we don't see anything right now that would kind of impact the margin expectations for that program versus where we originally modeled it.
咁咧，佢答翻佢就話其實咧，佢哋啲 contract 咧係有一啲加幅嘅條款喺度嘅。咁咧就唔一定咧係針對個 inflation 啊，咁其實可以針對好多嘢，即係可能啲 material 嘅價錢啊等等。去改變咧，佢哋都可以喺個 contract 或者個 final price 嗰度咧係有定嘅咁樣。
Thank you, Adam. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. The next question comes from Sujit De Silva of Roth MKM. Please proceed.
Hi, Pete. Hi, Peter. Hi, Adam. So first question on the launches, the 14-15 million for the 14-15 for the year. Sorry. What number are you roughly expecting from Virginia? And what's the incremental launch opportunities that are available from the U.S. soil that maybe weren't unavailable to New Zealand? If you talk about that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, hi, Sujit. So of the 14-15, it kind of depends a little bit on readiness of customers, but there could be anything up to sort of 6 launches out of that side this year. Like I say, depending on readiness of customers. Yeah.
Okay. And the incremental opportunity, Peter? The U.S. government or others or specific to Virginia?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, no, and the incremental opportunity. The one thing that we built that pad for was kind of a rapid response for our U.S. government customers, and we are seeing that capability really being valued. And more on that shortly, I would say. But it certainly will be. It certainly opens up, I would say, much greater access to doing defence or national security work, which is frankly why we intended to build that pad.
Okay.
Yes.
So for my follow-up,
real quick, Susan, on the impact of having this Virginia launch site now operational, there's some variable incremental costs that come along with launching from that range because we don't own the range like we do in New Zealand. But at the same time, we are seeing a strong degree of acceptance or willingness for customers to pay a premium to launch out of that range, for obvious reasons, right? Where, it's 3.5 hours outside of DC, and there's a lot of, benefits that come from a logistics perspective with having that in the backyard of some of our largest customers. So I think it's for us, it's hugely enabling, and it's something that our customers are to be very, very grateful that it's come online now. So again, I think it's going to be long-term be a very busy range for us. And I think, we're well set up to kind of leverage that into more and more U.S. government business.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Adam. And then as my follow-up, with the backlog growing here, I think $500 million, should we expect additional direct sell related opportunities like GlobalSat, MDA, or maybe was that a one-off, just to kind of set the expectations for what could be coming now that you had successfully won that?
Yeah, I mean, and this is kind of goes to the pace at which the
佢啱呢個問題咧，就係問而家畫面你見到嗰個 backlog 咁啊，503 mil 嘅 backlog 咧，究竟係有冇包括一啲簽咗 NDA 嘅數字咧，或者 contract 咧？會唔會係有啲簽咗 NDA， 即係 non-disclose 嘅一個 agreement， 即係嗰啲即係你唔可以 disclose 你嗰個 deal 嘅一個合同嘅同意書啊？一時唔記得咗個中文啦。咁咧會唔會係已經包括咗嗰啲數字咧？咁樣
backlog grows is, we tend to be working on fewer larger deals now than perhaps, as Adam mentioned before, like the quality of their backlog is super important to us. So, we're always working on some pretty significant deals. So, I would hope that we would continue to see those kind of larger lumps drop in as we close those out.
Yeah, I think, Suji, I mean, maybe a little bit more on that as well. Like, so obviously, we're very happy with what we've been able to secure for this type of application, and certainly we think that we're at the earlier stages of what this ultimate application could look like for us. But we're also very selective in who we work with, and we're not looking to basically go work with every kind of random opportunity out there looking to take advantage of this direct to mobile type of opportunity. So we're pretty focused on staying engaged with the absolute tier one of customers on this type of opportunity. So yes, we see more opportunities, but it's probably going to be in a very concentrated customer area, if you will.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, guys.
The next question comes from Matt Akers with Wells Fargo. Please proceed.
Hi, this is Eric Yan on for Matt. Just quickly wanted to ask about the margins at Celero, if there's any progress being made so far for getting it to 30% by early 24.
Yeah, I'll take the first pass at this because there's a bunch of different initiatives ongoing. Certainly, we believe that 30% gross margin is the right target for that business. I will say that we're still going through the process of burning through the legacy backlog that was there that came at pretty compromised gross margins. But if you look at the new business that we're booking, and we've been booking quite a bit of new business, all of that is at or above our target margin. So we feel very good about how kind of we're replenishing the backlog with new business as we burn off the old business. But there are also some longer term opportunities for that legacy backlog for that to become better gross margin, over time. But that's kind of just the traditional.
佢因為已經太耐嘅時間，佢 lock out 咗，我而家再 lock in 翻先，等下。如果你話要 positive 嘅 profit 咧，其實就一定未 target 到嘅，即係佢一直都係冇一個 schedule 係幾時去會有一個 positive profit。
go work with every, burning through the legacy going to take us a little bit longer. And again, that's just a function of, how quickly we kind of burn through that legacy backlog and get some other efficiencies.
好啦，咁咧其實咧啱個投行嗰人咧問佢係乜嘢咧？咁咧頭先咧我哋喺講咧個 Rklb 成間公司個 development 嘅時候啦，喺佢合併咗，即係喺佢上咗市之後啦，其實佢咧收購嘅其中一間公司咧叫 Solaro 嘅，咁啊係咧一個做太陽能板嘅公司嚟嘅，但係咧我哋頭先講咧話其實呢間係一間歷史好悠久嘅公司啦，咁啊係一個喺太空用嘅太陽能板領域咧嘅龍頭嚟，嗰間直頭係，咁咧。咁嗰個投行人咧就問佢話，其實咧你而家收購咗佢啦，咁啊佢本身有好多嗰間公司 stand alone 都有好多 backlog 噶嘛，即係其實佢好多貨要交去，已經簽咗合約要去做啊。咁咧嗰間公司本身咧嘅 profit margin 咧大約係30% 左右嘅。咁咧佢就有問佢就係話，其實你會唔會新嘅 contract 都可以 maintain 到呢個 profit margin 咧等等。咁其實咧 so far 咧佢答咧都係話佢哋咧會繼續咧 maintain 到，同埋嗰啲 backlog 咧佢哋都會照翻本身嗰間公司同佢哋客戶簽嘅 contract 去 defer 去交翻貨嘅。
In the business, but longer term, we absolutely feel like that's the right number to be had. And we say longer term, we're not talking like 3, 4, 5 years. It's a shorter time horizon than that, but it's probably not the next 12 months. Pete, do you have any further color on other margin enhancement opportunities for the Solaro business?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, one of a good set of points. One of the reasons why we're attracted to that acquisition was their new IMM beta cell technology, which is the highest performing cell technology in the world. So as we kind of take that from relatively small production volumes and almost R&D into volume production, that really expands some of those margin opportunities as well. And as Adam pointed out, I mean, we just got to burn off some of this long legacy stuff, but everything that the team has been booking and is looking exactly where we need it to be. It's just we're going to have this drag for a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next question comes from the line of Andre Madrid of Bank of America. Please proceed.
Hey guys, how are you? Kind of wanted to touch base on the comment you made regarding ocean recovery versus mid-air recovery. So, I mean, is there a big difference in between how much you might be able to recover for it to be received in mid-air versus ocean? Is there like an amount of the electron that you might not be able to recover in the event that it splashes down?
好啦，佢咧呢個問題咧就係問佢回收火箭嗰樣嘢㗎。咁咧我哋頭先講到啦，其實咧佢咧回收火箭咧有兩個方法。第一個咧就有得個 stage one 成支跌落海咧，之後再用架船撈翻起佢嘅。第二個方法咧就係咧佢 mid air 咧攞架直升機咧喺半空接住嗰個 stage one。咁咧而家嗰個 banker 咧就問佢其實兩個回收嘅方法咧對你哋回收翻嚟嘅嘢咧其實有幾大分別？咁我話其實佢應該就係講話你哋係可以重用嘅嘢分別有幾多啦，成本分別有幾多嘅。咁而家睇佢點答。
Yeah, hey Andre. No, not really at all. The reason why we didn't want to get it wet is there is some remedial work that's required when you get it wet. Purging and slightly more intense kind of recertification activities rather than it being dry. But as kind of we've splashed a whole bunch down now and retrieved them back, that's become really well understood for us. So when you trade the extra kind of work that you need to do to kind of replenish them and recertify a vehicle for launch against the cost of operating the helicopter, it's pretty much neutral. So at that point, what the water landing does enable us to do is recover more vehicles because we don't have the constraints of the operations of the helicopter. So it's kind of financially it's kind of the same, but we get to actually reuse more vehicles. So And as we splash more and more down, we kind of learn more and more. And as I mentioned, in the deck, we're making modifications to the vehicle that make it far more kind of seaworthy, if you will. So it's only going to get better.
咁其實因為佢暫時未試過成功喺空中接到嗰嚿嘢，所以佢都未答到佢究竟。
I mean, if it seems like it's not that much of an issue if it splashes down, is it worth the incremental development cost to?
即係因為其實佢而家未試過喺空中接啊，所以佢其實冇得直接俾到個好實在嘅比較佢。咁而家佢再有追問佢問題。
Develop the the landing system if you could also do recovery from the ocean for the Neutron platform. I mean, is that something you guys are considering as well?
咁佢話其實咁好啦，你用咗咁多時間去 develop 呢個海上同埋呢個空中回收啦，咁其實 worth 唔 worth 先？第一，第二就係其實你會唔會直接喺你嘅發射台嗰個回收咧？咁
Yeah, sure. I mean, they're just such different vehicles to scale. One of the advantages of Electron being so small is that these kind of sea recoveries and things make it simple and viable. A vehicle of that scale, an ocean splashdown is not something you'd want to do. It's a very very large thing floating in the ocean. So the big difference between Electron and Neutron is that Neutron is designed from day one to be landing and reusable, whereas Electron, I thought it was impossible for the longest period, so it was never conceived. And the mass margins you have on a small launch vehicle versus a large launch vehicle just make small launch vehicle recovery infinitely more difficult. So when you've got a fresh piece of paper and you can design it from scratch, then landing a Neutron that dry is by far the most sensible thing.
Understood. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question comes from Edison Yu of Deutsche Bank. Please proceed.
Hey guys, thanks for taking the question. First one, I'm sure you've seen there's been quite a few high-profile failures since the last earnings call by some of your peers. Have you seen any increased activity from maybe customers that weren't considering you before that are coming to you now because of this?
好啦，咁咧佢呢個問題就其實問得幾衰嘅。佢咧就話咧，你好多 competitor 咧，其實就好似近期嘅 business 咧都麻麻地啦，即係 fail 咗啊嘛，因為你都知道好似 ASTR 嗰啲，其實射都射唔到啦。咁咧佢就話呢啲單咧，其實有冇轉去你哋嗰度咧？咁樣。
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of one particular customer that's kind of offloaded, but I would say it's kind of a general sentiment that as more of these kind of emerging providers and others have these failures, it's kind of a reminder that this is way more difficult than kind of people sometimes give it credit for. So I think as that's kind of as you get more data points of how difficult it is and more data points of people failing to execute against it, it certainly changes the sentiment. And I would say that customers that we've been in discussions with for longer periods of time, those failures solidified their decision to come with us pretty quickly.
Understood. As you ramp up the spend on Neutron, how should we think about the next couple of big milestones? And I sort of asked that in the context of, maybe a couple in the second half, and also when would you consider announcing when exactly that first launch is from Neutron? Is that like a 4Q23 thing? Is that a 1Q24? Just how to think about the sequencing of leading up to the first launch.
I'll deal with the announcement and I'll hand it over to Adam to talk about the spin profile. But a launch vehicle, you think you're golden until you do a particular test. And in fact, it's across the whole space industry. This is why so many satellites delay. Is you do like a final TVAC test and find that you've got a thermal issue. And it's the same with launch vehicle development. Is you think you're golden until you go and do a test and realise that something's not right. So you have to operate in the mindset of kind of like a green light schedule until something proves otherwise. So I wouldn't expect us to make any kind of formal announcements of a launch date until it's pretty obvious that we're ready to launch it, and we've got stuff on a pad and things are moving along. Because as you've seen from some of the other emerging players, some of them have had a rocket on the pad for a year, working through various either launch vehicle or pad issues. So it's pretty hard to just put a stake in the sand. But we'll keep everybody updated on our progress, and if there's anything that crops up that we think is going to have an impact to timing, we'll certainly let everyone know.
Yeah, and that's what I would say that our baseline plan of record that's built into our financial plan assumes a launch in Q4 of 2024.
Appreciate the color. Thanks.
Thank you. And the next question comes from the line of Austin Moeller of Canaccord. Please proceed.
Hi, good afternoon. So just my question about Peter's comment around the ocean recovery of the electrons. If we go from recovering 50% of the electrons to potentially recovering 60 to 70% of electrons by doing water recovery, what does that do to your projections for gross margins for the launch business relative to your prior expectations?
Yeah, Austin, that's a good question. I mean, I think it really doesn't change it because this basically just buys down the risk of getting to that margin target, right? So I would say the margin targets, in a business like this, are never slam dunks. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. Recovery is part of it. There are other elements that we're driving, getting to our target margins, including a launch cadence of launching, twice monthly. Also some kind of, I'd say more traditional savings from BOM elements and labor efficiencies and so forth. So all of it kind of factors into our longer term target of getting into the low 50% gross margin range on a non-GAAP basis. So again, I wouldn't build in any increase to that based on this. I think just maybe it de-risks our ability to get there or what time frame we get there.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. This, recovery is one element of the program here.
Okay, and then also just considering your catbird seat position within the launch market right now, just given the shortage of available launch vehicles, you see Amazon and a Moonlander company all scrambling to get onto a ULA launch, even though it's a first launch for that vehicle. And do you expect to increase pricing at all for the Electron, just given the launch shortage and inflation pressures, or do you plan to keep prices where they're at?
好啊，佢問就係你嘅競爭對手就都有間價啦。另外就係而家 due to 呢個 inflation 啦，咁佢話你其實有冇加價嘅計劃？
I mean, electron pricing has never gone down. It's only ever gone up. But yeah, maybe you want to take that, Adam.
Yeah, I think over time, we see prices increasing. I think the greatest factor overall that will lead to increased pricing is that as we see more failures from aspirational launch companies, and a lot of these folks just won't have the capital, in my opinion, to execute. And so I think it's just a matter of time before kind of the natural selection process really leads us down to a point where launch for Electron becomes more expensive, not less expensive. And I think that also might be a reason why we're starting to see more kind of bulk buys from Constellation customers, because I think they realize that. I think, as difficult as it is to commit, to one platform with the potential of maybe cheaper and more plentiful opportunities coming on board, for launch or coming out to market, I think they're also realizing that, again, the difficulty of doing this and having a reliable launch platform is super important because time is money for a Constellation operator. So, I think that, my prediction would be that prices firm up again as we see continued kind of challenges for some of these aspirational launch people. But there's still enough noise out there from people who are trying to enter the market where, we don't have, I would say, a tremendous amount of pricing kind of leverage. But I think that's starting to change. I think we are starting to see, again, people realizing how difficult it is, and there's not going to be 100 successful launch companies. Maybe there's a handful or less than a handful of successful long-term players. And I think with that, you would normally see kind of pricing firm up. And, that's what I would expect to see happen over the course of the next, several years.
嗱咁咧，其實佢答佢咧，其實佢答咗佢一個好長嘅答案。咁咧，其實咧咁嘅總結咧就係話，其實佢就因為其實佢不停咁 develop recycle 啊，或者去 develop 一個更好嘅發射嘅方式啦，其實係為咗去 cost efficient 啲，其實係想個 price go low 啊。咁佢話佢哋嘅 competitor 都不停係打緊一啲平價嘅旗號啦。咁當然啦，佢就係話，咁如果去到有某啲日子，就係佢哋嘅客人啦，都發覺佢哋嘅對手原來全部都成日 fail 啊，成得，因為其實 Rklb 其中一個最勁嘅嘢就係，其實佢 launching 嘅 successful rate 係超過90%，即係由咁耐啊，由佢開間公司到而家，其實佢超過90%啦 successful rate。咁佢話佢如果呢樣嘢變成一個市場係覺得好重要嘅賣點嘅時候咧，佢哋先至有加價嘅空間咯。而家就睇唔到一個加價可以對佢哋嚟講個 business leverage 好多。
Okay, thanks for framing that. I appreciate it.
好啦，咁呢個 presentation 咧就完㗎啦，基本上咁咧就佢要講 Rklb 又講晒啦。咁好啦，咁 我哋咧好快咧就去睇一睇圖先。咁啊，頭先喺 presentation 嘅時候咧，我喺呢個10左右嗰啲位咧有，咁之後呢個060咧，我又沽咗去去990有去食，之後而家上翻我又再沽。好啦，咁 anyway 咧，咁啊，我哋講圖咧，聽完咁耐嘅 Rklb 咧，我哋都要睇一睇翻 Rklb 張圖啦。咁咧，佢出咗 ER 之後咧，我哋開翻張5 minutes 圖一下。咁咧，佢就其實咧一開市嘅時候咧就大力跌咗5-6% 落去。咁啊，之後而家抽翻上去啦，暫時咧就淨係跌咗1.44% 啫。咁啊，我哋拉翻闊少少啦，睇翻呢一圖啦。咁咧，我之前咧其實喺大約6日之前啦。上個星期嘅 live 咧，我哋都講咧就係話 Rklb 咧，我哋暫時咧就換咗一個畫圖嘅方法㗎。咁咧你就會見到咧，而家咧我就係有一支下降緊嘅旗啦。咁佢而家喺裏，咁咧嗱，如果佢今日 ER 後咧，你見到個啲足底啦，下影線底啦，其實咧就掂到我哋呢個，咁咧其實咧某程度上咧都係講緊咧呢支旗咧睇落暫時就幾適用。咁咧，如果我哋縮翻細少張圖啦，咁佢其實咧就行緊一個大啲嘅 range， 即係如果係一個中線嘅嚟講，就係下邊就3.5啦，上邊就係6蚊左右嘅位啦。咁我話佢圍繞住呢啲 range， 咁我話如果你係一個想收集嘅人咧，你應該睇住呢啲 range。咁啊，當年如果再拉闊啲咧，咁佢當年係一個 spec 股啦，咁啊一開始係10蚊嘅啦，咁啊當中經歷咗最牛嘅時候，即係嗰陣時成個市最癲嘅時候嚟啊，差唔多。咁之後一直慢慢退潮，咁又而家去到而家呢個，咁佢對比起佢嘅對手咧，其實已經好好嘅。咁我話如果你 check 翻當年同嘅一啲 spec 咧，佢就情況係唔錯嘅。咁我話講翻納指啦，納指咧，我哋嘅日線圖啦，咁就穿咗121之後咧，其實我哋都不停強調就係話佢係一個勢嘅，即係佢會繼續冧落去嘅，穿到121。咁我哋其實咧不停咁喺121嗰啲位附近咧就做啦。咁其實呢3-4日全部都係做緊同一樣。咁今日咧就做嘅嘢咧，暫時就係咁咧，而家就冧緊落去嘅。咁啊去到11943左右嘅位。咁咧相信咧，其實成個勢咧已經出咗嚟。咁話佢再跌落去，你話會唔會俾到 exact 嘅位啊？咁樣咁咧，你縮細翻啲咧，我哋就不停強調咧，上星期嘅底啦，即係大約926咧，應該係呢個淡友嘅第一個 target 嚟嘅。咁話我哋都係等嗰個 target 嘅。咁話睇翻嗰一日最低嘅位啦。哦，sorry 係923啊，咁啊，我整翻條射線出嚟先嚇。咁呢個係我哋淡友嘅 first target。咁咧，如果你穿到呢度的話咧，咁我哋就要去翻 D1 圖啦。如果佢穿到呢個第一個 target 啦，咁其實咧我哋就會 aim 嗰啲117啊。之後就已經去到113噶啦，咁所以咧你好睇呢個第一，咁啊非常接近啦，咁啊你唔排除咧佢去到呢度咧就嘭一聲咁彈翻上去12136，如果佢要玩到咁樣咧，咁啊冇辦法，咁但係如果你本身已經揸緊 put 咧，你就應該係盡量用你嘅方法揸實少。咁其實咧今日咧就已經去到10，咁但係咧我好明白咧今日係超爆門，我覺得能堅持下來嘅30幾人啦，咁當然啦，過咗12點亦都有一批人係會去咗瞓覺會 pause 咁咧，所以都非常多謝你哋居然會聽到而家呢個時。不過咧，我好想講一講啦。嗱，其實咧，你見到咧，我就分咗幾次食，咁好明顯呢一下咧係做得好差，即係呢個位 set 喺度，俾佢打走咗咧，係一個最錯誤嘅一件。 咁啊之後去衝落去嘅時候，我哋都唔對路，咁追翻入，咁啊呢度追咗落嚟咧，咁佢而家彈翻上去，我哋再開啦。咁當然你話你而家分開咗3次開 overall 咧，其實係食得多啲嘅，即係如果做嚟講，但係咧，如果你話做一個 trader 嘅角度嚟，我自己就覺得呢一下係非常之差啦，即係呢一下係唔啱。我自己好就係咁啊，而家就再等落去啦。咁你話仲推唔推到好盡好咧？咁啊，我覺得如果你有揸淡倉咧，就盡量唔好推啦，因為咧你好大機會推咧，佢一鏟上嚟，你就 miss 咗一個好大。咁話我去到呢啲咧，就已經係邊緣力啦要。咁話調翻轉，可能楞住1點咁樣，即係你最多俾佢抽上去，最多蝕手續費。唔係你又打平咗你個手續費就算啦。咁話你再揾位開，就唔好話我推到好盡，因為如果推到好盡咧，你可能就 miss 咗之後嘅白。哇！你如果12去到20，哇！你真係好早就 join 咗我哋 channel 啦，而家可能頭幾個月你又 join 咗。如果未開 put 咧，其實咧，但因為咧就嚟去到呢個位，呢個係第一關嚟嘛，即係你會唔會話喺呢度開 put 咧？我就覺得真係好困難。點解我呢度開咧？就係因為其實佢彈翻去我哋早市嗰個底嗰度，咁咧我本身預計佢啦，其實呢度會有阻力。咁我見到佢真係有阻力，即係呢個係5分鐘圖啦。如果你睇翻分鐘圖咧，你就會見到佢呢度咧轟落嚟啦，之後一扯落去上影頂唔順，之後再落去嗰下咧就即刻開嘅。咁咧，所以你呢一紮咧其實都冇位開啦。咁我而家去到呢度，即係我哋頭先講嘅呢個第一個位啦。咁啊，亦到接近啦。其實單一點，我當到咗先啦。Let's say，咁我話你再喺呢啲位沽落去，你基本上就係賭緊佢一下就打穿嗰。咁咧，實就係好困難。即係如果你係一個 day trader，調翻轉你呢度，你應該食，即係你食咗佢之後再睇下，即係佢穿咗你可以再。咁啦，如果你要沽，我好想沽嘅，甚至我死都要沽噶啦咁樣。咁咧，你至少都要打穿呢啲咧，先至好諗佢。咁你會見到咧，今日啦同琴日咧，我就好少拉黃金比例，因為其實我覺得已經冇需要，因為其實過咗121呢條界咧，基本上就勝負已分嘅啦。只不過係之後咧，究竟佢行個速度係幾快？咁今年個市咧行嘅速度咧太難 project 佢啦，所以我就都係用翻其。咁你見到咧，暫時日線就未收市啦。咁話其實成個勢你會覺得好散，即係佢雖然到呢啲support啦，但係你唔會覺得佢咧有一個剎車嘅可能。咁你睇 YM 啦 ，YM 咧就真係好差，即係你真係破咗一個大 support 啦。咁 ES 咧，ES 仲衰添，睇下佢個樣。咁咧 ES 就睇嚟。嗱，今日如無意外咧，好大機會就穿到呢條上升軌。咁佢穿到咧，佢咧就又係去搏勢嘅啫下。 咁話但係佢穿到咁樣咧，佢可能就冇乜嘢咧再 resist 佢。咁話佢可能一嘢就可以到呢個3。咁啊羅素啦，羅素咧暫時仲好維持，暫時仲好接近維持喺呢個藍色框入。咁你唔會，但係佢一脱離咧，你就會見到下個位140，即係佢一冧出嚟就冧3%。咁啊，而我嘅 Rklb 咧都係羅素嘅，所以咧而家喺度抹緊一把汗。不過你話好啦，咁我係 short 咗呢個4蚊嘅，咁到4蚊嘅話，我係咁而家仲有10% 嘅 buff。咁琴日有人問我點解唔等佢再跌多啲先至 short 咧？因為其實佢出 ER 前咧，我預計佢個 IV 咧已經係高嘅。出完之後咧，我唔覺得佢會去到4嘅。咁咧，如果佢到咗，我覺得係 bonus 4添。咁我話總之佢唔到，我話袋少少。咁你如果睇翻3分鐘圖啦，咁你會見到佢唔 test 呢個位咧，誓不罷休噶啦，應該今日。咁啊，我哋開到答啦，即係開多7分鐘啦。睇下大家有咩問題 wrap up 埋。咁頭先10 put 落去嘅咧，我喺呢個928咧，又食咗少少。咁啊，仲有一部分喺度。其實你話做 option，即係我諗你咁樣問咧，你係做 long 嗰邊㗎啦。咁咧，你做 long 嗰邊咧，就第一樣最重要，你究竟有冇個 target，同埋你遇唔遇到個 target 係幾多日之後到咯？即係如果你冇呢兩 data 咧，你就唔好掂 option 啦。即係你對其中一樣嘢冇信心的話，你答唔到出嚟咧，就唔好掂 option。而我而家唔掂 option 嘅原因就係因為我答唔到個時間。今年個市就係太難睇啊！所以我答。咁咧頭先咧應該咧係有 Fred 嘅行長有。咁喺佢講完嘢之後咧，就個市冧落去啦。咁咧而家咧要同大家分享一樣，就係呢一樣。個 Fed 嘅 probability 咧，而家直頭咧由估去到525至550咧，而家去到500至575滴，即係再刷新高咗我哋嘅呢個預期加息嘅最高幅度。 我最近係群內有個手足就 short put 咗呢個 refund， 而家睇緊究竟佢會唔會有機會出事，好似係 short 10蚊，咁啊而家仲有成8毫嘅空間俾佢。其實你話形態咧，即係你話其實係咪要睇形態去決定佢個時間啊嘛？我諗你係問樣。其實形態只不過係其中一樣嘢，你真係要去睇佢嘅速度咧，你真係好多嘢去結合先得。其實要簡講咧，就係你對嗰隻股自己 separate 定係嗰隻股票嘅了解程度。最簡單，你玩嗰隻 option， 你最少你要知道嗰隻嘅平均波幅係點樣，每一日佢可以波動到嘅金額係你最基本你要背晒呢樣嘢先啊！即係你要一講話我 call 到個數出嚟，咁你先至有機會玩。唔係嘅話咧，你坐低慢慢諗咧，你其實就等於唔熟嗰隻嘢，唔熟嗰隻嘢就唔搞。因為其實你做 long 永遠都係輸嘅機會係多啲嘅。好啦，咁今日咧就夠鐘啦，今日係已經 overrun 突晒啦。咁啊，多謝大家居然可以撐到呢個時候。我都知道今日應該係比較悶，大部分人都唔中意睇。不過非常多謝大家。好啊，咁啊，聽日再見啦，多謝晒大家，拜拜。